Icarus was murdered, and in this video I'll explain why I think that as I draw my Vtuber. Hi, I'm Corey, your friendly neighborhood Fiend, and these are my antics. Now let's get into why I think Icarus was done dirty and was actually murdered by Daedalus. For those of you that don't know the story of Icarus, I'll read you a version of it before explaining my theory. On the island of Crete lived a minotaur, a ferocious creature that was half man and half bull. The people of the island of Crete were terrified of the minotaur and loved nothing more than to feast on human flesh. They begged their ruler, King Minos, to order the creature to be killed, but the king decided against this. Instead, he constructed a plan to imprison the minotaur. To die at the hands of the minotaur would be one of the most terrible deaths imaginable, and King Minos believed that his enemies deserved to meet such a fate. He enlisted the help of Daedalus, a talented architect, inventor, and craftsman, and asked him to build a labyrinth, a maze of passages that would be so complex that it would virtually be impossible for anyone or anything to ever find a way out. Daedalus did as King Minos requested, and then, following the king's instructions, he enticed the Minotaur into the labyrinth by leaving a huge pile of fresh meat in its center. Once the Minotaur was in the labyrinth, the creature was unable to escape. King Minos was delighted. Anyone who was sent to the labyrinth would be trapped, and eventually they would be found by the Minotaur, who would eat them alive. Now he had the perfect punishment for his enemies. Deciding he had no further use for Daedalus, the king threw him into the labyrinth along with his son Icarus. The king expected the inventor and his son would be found by the Minotaur and eaten. Instead, unknown to the king, they escaped. After all, Daedalus had built the labyrinth and knew his way around. Once out of the labyrinth, Daedalus and Icarus carefully made their way to the shore of the island and pondered what to do next. The trees and bushes surrounding the beach would provide an ideal sanctuary for the time being. They could possibly survive for months or even years without being seen, but who would want to live like that, hiding away hoping they wouldn't be captured? They needed to find a way to leave the island, but how? They could not swim, the nearest land was too far away, and they would never make it. They could not leave by ship, all vessels were controlled by King Minos. Daedalus stared up at the sky and the seagulls that circled overhead. If only he was free as a bird. If only he and his son could just fly away. And then he had an idea which is both brilliant and ambitious. He would build a huge pair of wings. It would take some time, days, weeks even, but he would build a pair of wings for his son and himself. Exactly the same size as the wings of a seagull, but on a much larger scale. Scattered around the beach were seagull feathers. Daedalus instructed his son to collect as many as he could find. He worked carefully to build the wings, studying the exact angle and shape of the seagulls, and examining how the birds flew. At last, 6 weeks before they had escaped the labyrinth, the wings were ready. "These wings you will fly like a bird," Daedalus told his son, "but be careful. Make sure you do not fly too close to the sun. If you do, the wax that holds the feathers together will melt." Icarus nodded. In truth, he was barely listening. Hiding on the shore of the island of Crete had been boring. He had spent weeks doing nothing more exciting than his days than collecting feathers and catching fish for his father and himself to eat. And now, at last, they had a chance to escape. He shuffled impatiently as his father attached the wings to his arms, then helped his father position his own wings. "We are ready," his father told him. "Follow me." Daedalus ran forwards towards the ocean, sweeping his arms up and down as he did so. With a whoosh, he zoomed forward, rising into the air. Icarus copied his father. Suddenly, he found his feet were no longer on the ground. He was in the air. He was flying. He couldn't believe it. As he looked down at the sea below, his heart fluttered with excitement. It was as though his body was weightless. The wind whistled against his ears. He felt like a bird. Higher and higher, faster and faster he flew. Suddenly, Icarus realized he could hardly see his father. He had flown so high his father resembled a small dot below him. At the same time, he noticed a feather drift past and float down towards the sea. And then another. And then another. Too late, Icarus realized his wings were melting. He had flown too close to the sun. With every desperate swoop of his arms, more feathers fell, and soon his arms were almost bare. Down, 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 Icarus went. "Father!" he shouted before falling a heavy splash into the sea. His few remaining feathers floated onto the surface of the water as he sank. Daedalus could only watch helplessly. His heart felt as heavy as a stone as he flew onwards, leaving his son behind. The moral of the story is often considered to be that you should heed the warning of others and not recklessly overreach. But what if the story isn't the full truth? After all, Daedalus is the only one who had told it, being he was the only one that survived. Thus bloomed my theory. I decided to bring this up whenever we were discussing Greek mythology hot takes in Chris's Discord server. I mentioned that I thought Icarus wasn't properly educated on how wings worked and would fail, and I thought that this was intentional so he wouldn't make it out of the endeavor alive. And after I brought this up, people not only agreed with me, but added to my theory. My original theory quickly spiraled as it occurred to me that beeswax would have been used to make the wings, which is crucial evidence. You see, if you know anything about wax, you'll know beeswax is the hardest wax available with the highest melting point. It takes a lot to be able to melt beeswax, temperatures of about 150 degrees Fahrenheit minimum. However, as you get higher in the atmosphere, it gets colder, not hotter, so it is highly unlikely that this kind of wax would have melted under these normal circumstances. Additionally, it was pointed out that Daedalus actually tried to off his nephew out of jealousy, showing that he isn't above killing. This is why he was in Crete, after all. He ran there. Another, darker possibility is that Icarus never escaped the labyrinth to begin with, and that the story of the wings is actually a cover-up for the more gruesome fate he meant. This theory goes as follows. Daedalus, worried that his son would grow to rival him, misled him inside the labyrinth, leaving him to die at the hands of the Minotaur while Daedalus escaped. To be free of the blame, he crafted the story of Icarus flying too close to the sun and then went about his life. But what do you think? Leave your theories in the comments below. And if you like these styles of videos, subscribe to let me know too, and I'll make more. Subscribing really does help the channel more than I can express. Now with that done, let me explain the process of making my Vtuber. I started by getting the basic proportions from my original rough draft and fixing them, making sure to actually properly mirror things this time. I learned a lot from rigging my rough draft and broke things up into better pieces accordingly. The main difference between this version and my old version is the eyes. I made them much more detailed and expressive this time around. I also studied another VTuber model more closely to get the mouth to look better as well. Overall, my VTuber is fairly simple in its design, but it has quite a lot of symbolism. All the colors of my clothes are matched to the non-binary pride flag. My earrings are a semicolon, which references when an author could have ended a sentence, but instead chose to continue it, symbolizing how I've struggled with depression, but chose to press forward. The patches on my vest have my pronouns, my beliefs, and some of my favorite things. Overall, I'm much happier with this model, and while there is still more rigging I would like to do, I'm very proud of it. Since I have a bit of time left, I'm going to take this opportunity to tell you a bit more about myself. I'm Core, I use they them pronouns, and I've got autism and ADHD. For as long as I can remember, I've always loved to create things, whether that be crafts, art, stories, really anything I could get my hands on. When I found out about YouTube, I began to dream about making my own channel. I would pretend to make videos in the mirror, the whole shebang. These days, being creative has become my job, and I can't express how grateful I am for that. I honestly never thought it would be possible. I'm able to support myself and my cat doing what I love, and that's absolutely wild for me to think about. Also, here's my cat. Her name is Cantaloupe. If you guys have any questions for me, I would love to hear them. That's it for this video, so until next time, Fiend out.